Hey everybody, Coach Toolshed here, and today's video is not going to be discussing the disappointing, some might say terrible ending of Game of Thrones last night. That is not the purpose of today's video. No, today we're going to be discussing some information that came out near the end of last week that came from Ubisoft in regards to their sales, specifically on PC, and we're going to talk about how that relates to the Epic Game Store, and we also got some more just basic Epic Game Store nonsense to discuss. So we all know that the Epic Game Store has been running amok, snapping up whatever exclusive games they can from whatever publishers are willing to do business with them. They're taking indie games, they're taking major AAA games, they're taking Kickstarter games that were supposed to go on Steam that the public have already given money for to the developers, and now they're even doing business with them, which I think is especially shady. That to me is the worst of all the offenses. But today we're going to discuss one of the bigger publishers that has signed on, and that is Ubisoft. Ubisoft has been doing a deal with Epic for a while, and they have signed on to release multiple games that are going to be only available for PC on the Epic Game Store and Ubisoft's own Uplay platform. Now, if you are familiar with Uplay, it does not really get much good press. There's really no one that really enjoys playing on Uplay, both on PC, and it also is something that affects people on consoles, believe it or not. If you are a PC-only player, you might be surprised to know that even console players have to deal with logging into Uplay. Sometimes certain features of your game or the game itself might not work properly unless you're logged into Uplay, and so everyone who plays a Ubisoft game basically has to deal with this system, and nobody really likes the platform. Now, Ubisoft has a vested interest, and they have been recently trying to make a bigger push to get people onto the Uplay platform. Wow, that's a bit of a tongue twister, but they want to keep pushing people on there because people who buy games on their store, all of that money goes to Ubisoft. They're publishing the games, and they're also the platform holder in that case, so they would keep all the revenue, which essentially would negate the situation where Epic is trying to undercut Steam with their 12% revenue cut. Well, Ubisoft, if they get people to buy games on their storefront, that will of course enable them to recoup all of the revenue from the game, and that will even take away the 12% that the Epic Game Store would have. So, I've been waiting for a couple months now to get some information about the sales for The Division 2. Because what we've seen over the last few months is every time a game launches exclusively on the Epic Game Store, we've seen the developers come out and praise the Epic Game Store. And it's been kind of odd to me because they all have seemed to do it to praise the store, and in some cases credit the store with the sales of their game. Like you saw recently, World War Z, they came out and said, "Thank you to the Epic Game Store for helping us achieve this." And it just seems weird. You don't usually see developers and publishers thanking a platform holder for helping them sell the game, because the platform it's on, the Epic Game Store, has been shrouded heavily in negative press, and the Epic Game Store is also a much smaller platform than on Steam. So if a game, you're pulling it off of Steam to put it exclusively on the Epic Game Store, I fail to see how exactly that's helping you push the sales. Seems to me like you probably would have made more sales if you had it available on multiple platforms, but hey, that's just me. I'm crazy. But of course, we've had the PR spins. We had the ridiculous PR spin when they talked about Metro Exodus selling 2.5 times the amount of copies of Last Light when that was on Steam in the corresponding period of time. Of course, anyone who knows much about the marketplace knew that Metro Exodus was going to vastly outsell the previous games in the series. There was a lot more promotional money being put into this. There was a lot more talk about the game itself. The games had built up a cult following. The Metro series had built up a cult following over the last few years. So this was always going to be a situation where no matter what, the game was going to outsell its predecessor on whatever platform. So the notion that it somehow did better on Epic because it was on Epic is totally foolish. Same thing, like I said, with World War Z and other games. Other developers have come out that have had their games exclusive in the last few months, and I keep seeing them, they always keep praising the Epic Game Store, and it almost to the point where I felt like it might have been contractually obligated of them to do so, because every single one of them seemed to do it. But the big shoe I was waiting to fall was the Division 2. Because that is a game that we can track more accurately. 2016 wasn't that long ago, so when they can compare sales directly from the Division 1 to the Division 2. Now, this is something we could sink our teeth into, and for months we haven't gotten any information. We didn't hear anything from Ubisoft praising the Epic Game Store, aside from them saying that they were partnered and happy with the partnership, but we didn't hear anything specific about the sales of this game. So, last week we did get a little bit of information, and it was interesting in what they didn't say in their financial report, because they left out a key factor while they were talking about the success, or rather the not so great success, of the Division 2. Now, overall, they said that the sales were down from what they expected slightly, not insane. They said on consoles, the sales were down, both on PlayStation 4 and on Xbox. They were a little bit lower for the Division 2 than what they were for the Division 1. So they were a little bit surprised by that. But on PC, they said that the numbers held the same. They said that they were in line with the sales of the Division 1 for the same amount of time that the games were on sale. So, what does that mean? Well, first off, we know the PC market is getting bigger year by year. Now, it's not exploding, but it is getting much bigger year by year. So this would hold true here in this case if the sales are slightly down on consoles and the sales are flat on PC. Well, with the increase in the PC fan base and more people using the platform, it does make sense for those numbers to be pretty much stagnant if the sales are also depressed on consoles. That just stands to reason. Now, the interesting thing here is what Ubisoft said in regards to the amount of downloads they had on Uplay between the Division 2 and the Division 1. This is the key factor here, because they said that the sales of the game on Uplay have increased tenfold as compared to the Division 1. So what does that mean? Well, pulling the game off Steam certainly did not push people to buy the game on the Epic Game Store. It pushed them to go to Uplay, a platform and a launcher that is notorious for being panned by the PC community especially. So what we have here is a situation where the Epic Game Store is turning off so many players that people are willing to go and install the Uplay launcher and play games there on a platform that, like I said, no one really is a huge fan of, just to not buy the game on the Epic Game Store. So right here, we finally have a situation where you can point to and say, no, the sales of these games on these other platforms most definitely would have been higher on Steam. The situation that has arisen where we've seen the praise from these smaller developers talking about how much Epic has helped them sell their game is sheer and utter nonsense. We can't quantify the lost sales of a game like World War Z. We don't know what it would have sold on Steam. But with the Division and the Division 2, we have a much more concrete picture of the fact that the Epic Game Store is actually turning customers away from potential sales. Now, I will tip my hat to Ubisoft. If this was their master plan to bank on the fact that the Epic Game Store was not going to be something that people wanted in order to push more customers onto Uplay, I must say that is diabolical and actually a bit of genius. Now, I think that there's probably some luck involved. I don't think when Ubisoft signed the exclusivity deal with Epic that they thought that there was going to be this much backlash towards the store in the coming months. But regardless, what these figures show, and what is interesting, like I said, they left out any talk about the Epic Game Store sales when they talked about their financial report. So specifically, they were trying to hype up the fact that the Uplay store is doing well. They actually increased the amount of sales on the store year over year quite substantially, and they were very pleased with that. But what we have here is pretty much indisputable facts that people are not going to the Epic Game Store to buy games. So when you see these press releases, when you see the developers talking about how the Epic Game Store is the reason why they're selling so many copies, that is just complete and utter nonsense. Now, you do have the case for the developers that if Epic is funding them, it can help keep them paying the bills. It can help with all sorts of things. It can help get them over the finish line when it comes to the production of the game. And I'm not disputing that. But I wish that both sides, the developers and Epic, would stop trying to blow smoke and try to act like what they're doing is some great and noble cause. Because clearly what they're doing, Epic is just trying to smash their way into the marketplace so they can establish themselves as quickly as possible as a place where you have to go to play these certain games. Now, moving on quickly, it's also fair to point out that for all the talk of Epic saying that they're doing what's best for the developers, they had this Epic Mega Sale last week, which originally, when it first was announced, got a lot of great public relations, which is clearly what they were trying to go for, because they said, oh no, we're going to discount all these games on the store for $10, and we're going to foot the bill. So the publishers, the developers, they're not going to have to worry about it. We're just going to discount the games, and we will cover the difference. And everyone was praising them, until we realized that there were multiple publishers and developers that were not happy with their games being lowered in price, because that might upset some of the other platform holders that the Epic doesn't hold sway over. Because you see, Epic doesn't have exclusivity for every single game, and there's other platform holders such as Sony, Microsoft, and maybe even Steam in cases where there's also a Steam launch of the game. So when Epic lowers the price of the game, especially for games like Borderlands 3, which is on pre-order, stuff like that, these companies aren't going to want to see the price of their games lowered without their knowledge. And that's what we saw happen. And you saw, as a result, multiple publishers had to pull their games off of pre-order because Epic was devaluing their product. And that's also going to upset the platform holders. Like, say, Sony's not going to be happy if people can get a Borderlands 3 pre-order on the Epic Game Store for $10 cheaper than they can get on PSN, because that is going to cut into Sony's potential to earn more pre-orders. So that's only going to upset the other platform holders. Now, of course, Tim Sweeney doesn't care about that, because he thinks he is the savior of PC gaming, and of course of gaming in general. He thinks he's going to single-handedly save developers. Of course, this is all nonsense, but that's the PR spin. I just wanted to quickly blow a hole in it today, because, as always, everything that comes out of the Epic Game Store smells like double talk and nonsense. But that's it for me, Coach Toolshed. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Please subscribe if you want to stay in tune with the channel headed forward. And as always, keep it turned to 11.